All right, we're gonna go live in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. My name's McKaylee. I work at Tattered Cover Bookstore. And first and foremost, I want to say thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here as a part of this event. We are thrilled to just be supporting local authors and to be here for them and here for you. But in all honesty, it's the other way around. The reason that we're still here today is because of you, because of our community. Tattered Cover Bookstore is a local independent bookstore in Denver, and we have been around now for 50 years, which is incredible for an independent bookstore. But we wouldn't have made it through the last year or the last 50 without our community. So thank you so much for being a part of it, whether it is a virtual community or hopefully later in the year in person. We cannot thank you enough for that. So for those of you who don't know, I mentioned it earlier that Tattered Cover is a local independent bookstore in Denver, Colorado. And we have 4 locations, soon to be 5, which is amazing and very exciting. We're opening up our 5th location in our Stanley Marketplace, which is a children's only location. And we're very excited for that. And also right now, one of our stores is mid-move. It's gonna be now at McGregor Square, across the way from our from Coors Field, which is very exciting. But so right now we have 3 stores open. You can come visit us as long as you're wearing your mask over your mouth and your nose. We are still asking for a mask ordinance due to the safety of our staff, our younger patrons, and all around at this time. So we thank you for complying with that. But if you want to shop online in your pajamas in your own home, you can do that at tatteredcover.com. Our website is open 24/7 to meet all of your bookish needs. And I want to let you know as well that closed captioning is enabled on this video should you want it or need it. There's a black bar at the bottom of the screen with a button labeled CC on it. You can click that button and closed captioning is enabled if you want it or need it. We will also be having a question and answer, a Q&A session with the audience. Some of you are already active in the chat, and that is where you're going to be asking questions on the chat next to the screen that you're watching us on right now. Also on tatteredcover.com that you can check out our upcoming events. And oh my gosh, we have so many. We have so many amazing events. Like on Monday, the 24th, we have author Rita Woods and her new book, Remembrance. We have show at Ocean Bong on the 1st of June. It's incredible. Just check it out. The best way to get up-to-date information on our events is by following us on social media or signing up for our email newsletter. But the author event that we have tonight, I'm very excited for. Again, I mentioned Manuel Ramos is a local author here in Colorado, and he's going to be in conversation with Dr. Jorge Zamora. So just a little bit about our guest tonight. Dr. Zamora has a law degree from Mexico, UNAM, 1984, and is a PhD in Spanish literature from TTU in 1999. He's an international business lawyer for 10 years and teaches undergraduate courses in business, Spanish, Spanish translation, Spanish legal studies, and other Spanish courses for the professions. He also teaches graduate courses in contemporary Latin American literature. His literary fields of interest include horror and the grotesque in Hispanic fiction, Hispanic crime fiction, and the Hispanic historical novel. His publications include several articles, a book on the grotesque, and a co-edited anthology of studies in Hispanic crime fiction. And then our author of the hour tonight, Manuel Ramos, is the author of 11 novels and a short story collection. He has received the Colorado Book Award twice, the Chicano/Latino Literary Award, the Top Hand Award from the Colorado Authors League, and honorable mentions from the Latino International Book Awards. His first novel, The Ballad of Rocky Ruiz, was a finalist for the Edgar Award. My Bad, A Mile High Noir, was a Seamus finalist. He is a co-founder of and regular contributor to the award-winning internet magazine La Bloga, which is labloga.blogspot.com, which deals with Latino literature, culture, news, and opinion. His latest novel, Angels in the Wind, was published by Arte Publico Press in 2001, and that is the book, Angels in the Wind, that we are celebrating today. It is my honor to welcome Manuel and Jorge to the screen with me, so we're going to turn it over so we can see all of them. Hello, gentlemen. We're going to unmute Manuel. He seems to have been muted accidentally here. There he is. Hello.
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 Well, we're very excited to have you both with us. This conversation is going to be very insightful, and I'm very excited for it. And congratulations, Manuel, on your new book.
Thank you, McKaylee. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, I'm going to hand it over to the pair of you. And like I said, I will pop back in later so I can help facilitate the Q&A. And we have a special surprise for our viewers. If you registered for this event, we have some door prizes we're going to give away later. So stay tuned for that. For now, Dr. Zamora, after you.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Manuel, for inviting me, and the Tattered Bookstore as well. And congratulations, Manuel, on finishing another project. As I understand, the way we're going to handle this is you're going to give us a little teaser, a little excerpt from your book. Is that correct? You're going to read parts of the new novel?
That's right. I'm planning to do a quick reading, a short reading, a few minutes. Then you and I can talk about it. And I think you've read the book, right?
Oh, yeah. I better have, right?
So we should be able to have a semi-coherent conversation, I think, about the book.
Yes, yes.
So I'll go ahead and do the reading now, if you're ready, Professor.
Certainly.
I did want to thank the Tattered Cover for once again hosting me and with a new book. We've done this with every one of my books, and it's always been a great event. This one's, of course, a little different because of the virtual nature of it, but I still think we can have some fun. And so I want to thank the bookstore. I want to thank all the people who are online tonight watching us. I really appreciate the support. I want to thank Flo, my wife, who has done all kinds of stuff to promote the event and is, of course, my right-hand assistant and the actual boss of the business. So I'm happy to be working for her. So anyway, here we go. I'm gonna read from one of the middle chapters in the book, and I picked this reading because it sets the tone of the story, and it's an example of Gus Corral's bad condition that we find him in at the beginning of the story. You know, Gus, the Chicano private eye, is suffering from the lingering effects of a beating that he was given at the conclusion of his last case, which I wrote about in the book, The Golden Havana Night. At the urging of Gus's sister, he's traveled to the small town of Melton in eastern Colorado to help search for his cousin's boy, Matias, or Matt. Matt has run away several times in the past, but this time he hasn't returned, and it's been more than a month, so people are getting worried, and they've asked Gus for help in trying to find him. Where I start the reading here is after he's already talked with a shady character named Wes Delgado, and also the chief of police of the small town of Melton, Rob Lopez. And he's now driving back to Essie's place. Essie is the aunt. And he's in his old and shaky Chevy pickup. I felt like I was sucked into a black bag as soon as I left the town in limits and turned onto Deer Lick Way, the road to Essie's house. I concentrated on the stretch lit by my headlights, and I told myself that I was driving in the quiet and peaceful countryside, nothing to worry about. No rush hour madness, no out of control truckers, no drunk office workers speeding to the next happy hour. I breathed in deep and full. There had been a time when I would have believed those thoughts, and the ride wouldn't have meant anything to me except as a way to get to where I would sleep. But that was before my dented head and warped imagination. Now I turned to the darkest alternative. I followed Essie's directions, and for a few miles my phone's GPS worked. But when I climbed a small hill and then sunk below the horizon, my phone went blank, and Essie's words jumbled together in my memory. "It's not that hard," I whispered in the narrow cab of my pickup. "Focus, man." The truck's smell, grease and sweat, reassured me. The smooth-running Chevy six-banger gave me confidence. I relaxed and remembered that Essie said to watch for a sign with an arrow pointing to Gilroy Road. I picked up speed on the downslope of the hill. The sky was dotted with stars never seen in the city. Night draped over my faded pickup. I cruised faster than I should have. Images of Wes Delgado and Rob Lopez mixed with the photographs of Matt that George, Matt's father, had given me. I worried about Matt and couldn't avoid the darkest thoughts about what had happened to him. I almost drove past the sign that appeared suddenly in my headlights. I slammed the brakes and the pickup fishtailed on the gravel road. I wrenched the oversized steering wheel and hoped I'd stay on the gravel, but I didn't. The truck swayed and rocked, and I ended up turned around in the shoulder soft dirt. The sudden stop killed my engine. My headlights flickered and I turned them off. I could see only blackness. I started to sweat. I felt dizzy, and a hot flash confirmed I was in panic mode, although nothing serious had happened. I took in deeper breaths of air. I pumped the gas pedal and turned the key. I did that too many times and stopped only when I accepted that I'd flooded the engine. You dumb fucker, I said to myself. Again, my thinking turned to Delgado and Lopez. I didn't like either one, but that wasn't anything new for me. I'd always been a skeptical guy, a North Side kid who didn't trust anyone who wasn't his sister. It was a given that I wouldn't feel comfortable around the police chief. And Wes Delgado, well, he was just too weird. I needed to make another run at him, loosen up all that he knew about where Matt Montoya might have gone and why he left. I began to make a list of questions for Delgado. The movement to my right was small, nothing more than a smoky wisp rustling the sage. But then it happened again. I turned on the headlights. Off to the side, someone ducked to the ground, someone with long hair. I jumped from the cab and landed on soft earth. It gave way under my weight, causing me to roll on the ground, almost brushing up against a cactus. Jesus, I shouted. I struggled to my feet and ran to where I'd seen the long-haired person. At least I thought I'd seen someone. I stumbled again on rocks and loose dirt, fell to my knees and cursed. I waited and listened. Nothing. I stayed on my knees, my eyes adjusted to the darkness, and strange, unearthly objects slowly morphed into boulders, tumbleweeds, and sandy mounds. The only movement came from the slight breeze that caressed the scrub bushes. The night turned a deep purple. The stars overhead exploded and soared as though the sky moved, dragging me along, forcing me to stand up and then to holler with all the energy my depleted soul could muster. Matt Montoya, it's your Uncle Gus. Your family needs to see you, Matt. Talk to me. Let me take you home. The moon answered with silence. The stars ignored me. Whoever or whatever I'd seen was gone. That's it.
Great. That's, as we talk, that's one of the parts I remember most from reading the novel, which has to do with the scenery, the driving out in the loneliness, and I'll come back to that. But again, congratulations on finishing this project, Manuel. And I really enjoyed it. I've read all of the Gus Corral novels and have seen Gus evolve through the different works, which is part of the pleasure of reading the novels. My first question, though, I'm going to borrow a question from an interview that I read once of Megan Abbott. They were interviewing her, and you subtitle all the Gus Corral novels with a Mile High Noir. And my question to you as a writer, as a novelist of noir, and what would you say is the difference between, and this is a little bit of a nerdy question, but people seem to sometimes not distinguish between noir and hard-boiled fiction. What is you've read a lot. I can read a lot of your background. I can hear, rather, some of the authors that might have influenced you. But back to my question, how do you distinguish between noir and hard-boiled?
Okay, sure. For me, and this is an opinion that I've developed over the years. Noir is more about atmosphere, tone, the voice of the author. You know, it's dark, obviously, with the name of noir, and it usually doesn't end well. There's not necessarily a hero in the traditional sense. The protagonist can often be the criminal and or the victim. Hardboiled is more about the action, you know, the language of the story. So, for example, Mickey Spillane, the well-known writer who writes about Mike Hammer, you know, that to me, that's hard-boiled crime fiction. There's a lot of action, a lot of male posturing, a lot of violence, usually. And with noir, there can be some of that stuff, of course, in a noir story, but overall, it's more of an attitude. It's more of the atmosphere of the story itself. So early on, when I was first starting to write this kind of stuff, I belonged to a web group chat room that talked about noir and hardboiled. And one of the things I took from that was that in a noir story, you know, the protagonist is screwed at the beginning of the first page, and then it goes downhill from there, you know. So that's the general idea of what you're dealing with a dark noir atmospheric kind of story. And with hardboiled, it's going to be more, like I said, about the action. I used to say that, hardboiled compared to what I wrote more like huevos rancheros instead of hardboiled. So I threw in a little bit of spice and culture.
Yeah. One of the things that James Elroy, whom you've actually met, I think, from our conversations, the author of LA Confidential and the Black Dahlia and all that amazing LA series, and Otto Penzler, they put together an anthology once, and they said in their own way that noir's main characters are basically losers, like you mentioned, sort of. And speaking of the evolution of Gus Corral, would you put him, where would you place Gus Corral? In the loser category, so to speak, in the hard-boiled category, or in a, I mean, it's, you don't want to be categorizing everything, but just to kind of get a sense of what you feel, as opposed to what I might tell you right now how I see it, but I'd like to hear you first.
Well, the evolution of Gus is certainly part and parcel of what I'm trying to write about. You know, the first time he appears is in the short story, the Skull of Pancho Villa, which later became chapter 5 of the first novel that he's in, Desperado. And at that point, you know, Gus is really down and out. I mean, he's his sisters have keep telling him that he's messed up. You know, he's never lived up to his promise that he was the smartest guy in the family, but he's let it all go to waste. He's been divorced, and at the beginning of the Desperado, you know, he's sleeping in the back room of his ex-wife's segunda. You know, she runs a secondhand store, and he's working for her and sleeping in the cot in the back room. He has no real career ambitions, and he's kind of forced into becoming an investigator because his sister is the victim of a burglary. And they lose the skull of Pancho Villa to the burglar, which is another story we won't get into right now. But and so he, you know, he becomes by accident an investigator, and then the novels progress from there. You know, in that first one, he's an accidental investigator, and he's just sort of drifting along and gets involved in something that's a little over his head. And at the end of that Desperado, you know, it's a very bleak and dark ending. But then Gus continues along, and now in Angels in the Wind, he's a professional investigator. You know, he's actually doing this for business, and his family calls on him for help, and he feels a loyalty to the family that he takes on the job, even though he has been injured and is suffering from headaches and paranoia, the other things that have gone along with the repercussions from the beating. So, he's moved ahead a bit. I still like to call my stuff, instead of noir or hardboiled, I like to call it Chicano noir, just because there's an added, I think there's an added element to the stories that comes along with Gus's community, Gus's history, the culture, his role in life as a member of a group of people that at one time, and continuing into the present, had grievances against police brutality, the lack of education, those kinds of social issues are all in the background of Gus, moving him along. The gentrification of the north side of Denver plays a critical role in a couple of the stories. So it's all tinged with the darkness of noir, because bad things still happen, especially to Gus. But there's something else going on, that I like, and that's where the term for me, Chicano noir, comes in.
Yeah. Now, speaking of where he's from, Northside Denver, and of noir and of hard boiled, usually when one, and again, I'm talking about, I guess you could call it stereotypes, when one thinks of the classical hard boiled detective, you put him in his hometown or in his city, just like Gus was in Northside Denver, mostly, especially in the beginning and now. But Gus gets around. I mean, he's gone to Mexico, he's gone to Cuba, he's gone to the mountains. I can't remember if that was in Colorado, but a lot has happened to Gus in how he gets around. So how important is location to you, as far as, and what plays into when you're picking a location during your creative process? What makes you choose the locale for your story?
Well, picking the north side as the setting for at least the early stories of Gus was, it just had to be that way. I live in the north side. Flo and I have lived here for decades. We've seen all the changes. We're in the middle of the changes. And we have a long history here of being in the north side. And, for me to write a story about a Chicano guy who grew up on the streets of the north side just seemed automatic, something that I was just going to naturally write about. With the growth of Gus in terms of his personality and his humanity, then he's also seeing more of the world outside of his close-knit Northside community and outside of his immediate family, his sisters primarily. So in Angels in the Wind, we have him traveling to Eastern Colorado, a place he would never go to a few years ago. I mean, there's nothing out there for him, nothing like the city of Denver. The story starts in Denver and ends in Denver, but the bulk of it takes place out there in the plains and the boonies of Colorado. And the reason one of the primary reasons that I wanted to do that was not only because it offered a variety for Gus and showed that he was changing, and so the setting of the story was also going to change, but it's also a part of Colorado that's not the usual depiction of the state. There have been some wonderful writers and novels that have come out of Eastern Colorado, but really, when you think of a Colorado mystery, you're going to think of mountains usually, or the city of Denver. And so I was trying to do something a little different, expand my own outlook, expand my own box that I'm in when I start to write. It's all part of the progression, all part of the change moving forward. So there we are now in Melton, Colorado.
Yeah. Now I have to say, you have been out in the boonies before. What I consider one of your darkest and most noir stories. I think it's called "The Day the Air Conditioner Died."
Oh yeah.
I particularly enjoyed that story, but that's out in the middle of nowhere. And I kind of when Gus went to Melton, it kind of reminded me of that character whose name I forgot now, the roofer that goes to that town, and all
Yeah.
the action that occurs out there in the middle of nowhere. So I was wondering, this is part of what my question comes from. I was wondering if you feel you're writing not just because of Gus's evolution, it seems to tend to gravitate to that lonely country side. It actually reminded me some parts of some of the writing of what is his name, James Lee Burke,
Yeah.
and in especially his Texan character. He has two. He has the New Orleans character Robichaud, and his Texan character, which I don't remember his name right now. But I and if you remember Sherlock Holmes, Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes tells in one of the many stories he tells Watson, he says the worst murders don't happen in the city; they happen out here in the what you're calling the beautiful countryside. So I was thinking, Gus seems to be gravitating, and also remember his, or I remember his big. I don't want to give any of the novels away, but the big shootout they have out up in the mountains,
Right.
and so that's what I mean when I say that Gus gets around. It's not like some other detectives, not to be critical, but I mean, and I love detectives being in their staying in their place, but if you're going to read Gus Corral, you're not going to just have Gus Corral, walking the streets of Denver. Gus Corral's going to be, he's going to get around. You're going to be in different places at different times, in different adventures and misadventures. Yes. So anyway, my other comment was going to be about the whole Chicano concept, which you kind of touched on that. And I have been somewhat happily surprised to discover a series of Mexican American detectives throughout crime fiction. One of my favorite stories of Chandler, I think it's called Spanish Blood, and it has his detective Sam de la Guerra, I think. And then there's that wonderful author Margaret Miller. She put together a whole trilogy of what's his name? I wrote it. Oh, Tom Aragon. And he's a lawyer, by the way, like you and I, recovering lawyers. And and then it seems like authors touch on the Mexican American detective through the ages.
Yeah.
And more recently, the great Latin American writer who passed away, Roberto Bolaño, I'm obsessed with this character he created in his last book, 2666. And the character only lasts like 6 pages, but it's an amazing character. His name is Harry Magaña. And then the recently died author from Mexico City, F.G. Hagenbeck, he created Sonny Baca. He's a Mexican American from California, kind of a hippie that surf. He's from
Well, Rudy Anaya had a detective named Sonny Baca.
Yes, I got the names wrong. It's not Sonny Baca. It's a similar name, but it's not Sonny Baca. That is Rudy Anaya, whom you mention in your Angels in the Wind. You kind of do a nod to, don't you, to Rudy Anaya? Yeah,
Rudy Anaya, yes.
So anyway, how would you? And I know you may have not read all of these characters, and I would like for you to say, okay, well, this is Gus is Chicano. Give us more about his Chicano character, so to speak. What makes him, because it's not quite the same if you have a Mexican American detective and a Chicano detective. What is the act? How do you give meaning to that term?
Well, the key for me is that that's the way Gus understands himself.
Okay.
You know, it really doesn't have anything to do with what other people think of him as. You know, Gus himself, especially through the influence of his sister, his older sister, Corinne, who's been very active, politically active, involved in social movements. She's the kind of person, you know, that would have been out in the protests of the Black Lives Matter. She's had this influence on Gus so that his own self-perception is of a Chicano, which means a person of Mexican American and heritage, raised in the States, most likely, understands the United States culture and history, but also understands his own community's culture and history, and is politically aware of those things. Now, he may not be much of an activist in the sense of his sister, who's involved in different causes and all that, but still, that's how he identifies. And I think that's very important in the way the stories play out. His loyalty to his family is something that, you know, several cultures and people from around the world understand, you know, loyalty to family. But he takes it a step further because of the Chicanismo attitude toward familia. And so he's willing to sacrifice, he's willing to do some things that other people might not be willing to do, all in the name of family. You know, you mentioned the fact that Mexican American detectives have been in crime fiction for a while. I actually wrote an article years ago that traced all of that, you know, traced all that history up to that time. And I was surprised to learn about Mariano Mercado, who was a detective in Mexico City, who appeared in the dime detective magazines and, you know, the pulp magazines of the 30s and 40s. And there he was, you know, a Mexican guy being a detective, not written by a Mexican, but still, you know, appearing early on in that whole scenario of crime fiction that involves Latinos or Mexican Americans. Now today, there's just more and more of that coming out. I mean, people of color are really being very active in crime fiction, and so there's all kinds of different detectives now and different investigators. It's just wonderful to see. It's just opening up.
Yeah. I would like you to talk to us, especially for those who haven't read, you are missing out, about your women, the women in your Gus Corral novels, because that's a very important part of the whole structure of your novel, I think.
Did you have anyone in mind particularly?
Well, of course, Corinne. Corinne is
Yeah.
absolutely powerful. She's so strong, but you always have a lot of strong women in your novels, whether they be good or bad. Sometimes they
Some have
become
been
bad.
very bad, huh?
Yeah, and some of them actually do the heavy lifting. Again, I don't want to spoil anything in any of the novels, but when I come back and reread, I think, wait a minute, this wasn't done by the male character. This actually was accomplished by the female character. So your women they're very strong women in that show up in your novel. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, Professor, I think some of that comes from, you know, my own background. I mean, you should separate, I believe, the art from the artist. You know, it's not always coinciding. But in my particular case, I come from a family. I had several aunts, and then my mother. These were very strong and independent women. They were doing things when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s that were amazing. I mean, providing for families and taking care of their children in a way that made sure that they got an education, even though that was something that was unheard of at the time. And that had to influence me in some way, right? I mean, even if it was subconscious, the fact that in my own family I had a history of very strong women, it's going to be reflected, I guess, in the stories I wrote. And I'm still impressed by the women that I knew as a child when I was growing up. Including my mother, who did some amazing things on her own, even when she was a young girl. So there's that, and then I think there's just a sense that the characters in my books. One thing I try to do is make them as three-dimensional as I can. So that they're not flat caricatures or stereotypes. So you're absolutely right. Some of them are bad in the sense of being bad, and then some are good. But there's a sense of personality or something within themselves. We might call it ganas, or we might call it ambition. Something like that keeps these people moving forward. Corinne was especially, Gus's older sister. I really enjoyed writing about her. And she plays a bigger role in the first couple of novels of Gus than she does in the later ones. But that again reflects, Gus is on his own trajectory now, and he's moving ahead in certain ways. So he's going to be leaving behind some of the other things that he grew up with. But Corinne and then the other sister, Max, are very independent and their own personalities, I hope, come through in the stories. And I just feel I needed to do it that way. And some of it is unconscious, of course. You write what comes into your head, and you don't often know exactly what you're doing. I don't, anyway.
Well, we have time for one more question, and I wish we had more time. But anyway, my final question has to do with what I call props. Just really quick. It's almost a silly question, but I always, Sherlock Holmes had his pipe. Other detectives have their props. And is Gus Corral, has he finally developed his prop with that wonderful pickup in Angels in the Wind? Is he done driving his sister's little car? That's my real question.
That's right. He's not driving that thing anymore. That whatever that was that showed up in the. He's riding. It's a 1960 Chevy Apache pickup that's kind of beat up, kind of shaky. But Gus has big dreams on fixing it up, like a lot of Chicanos do about their cars. We're gonna fix them up sooner or later, one of these days. And it's a work in progress, that pickup. But he's managed to put a sign on the side of the truck that advertises that he's an investigator. So now it's his roving office, and he drives all the way to Eastern Colorado in that thing, and then from there to Pueblo. And as I read, he got stuck in the sand.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of truck. But yeah, I love that truck too.
Yeah. Well, good. I see it again. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And now we go to the general questions, I think, Michaela. I'm not sure.
No, that's exactly correct, Jorge. Well done. And that was such a lively conversation. I love Jorge. You had wonderful questions, and Manuel, diving deeper into this series and your career. I know I'm not alone in saying that it was really hard to stop you two, but I know we've got some eager, very excited viewers here in the chat that they've been sharing stories about, I have every book with the characters of Gus Corral and Luis Montes. I love the books. What you do for me is you allow me to look into places that I've never really looked at before. Wonderful comments, lots of love here tonight. So I want to encourage everyone that's in the chat to please feel free to ask your questions there, that all of you have been so active so far. So a really good one is, what inspires you so much about Colorado that you write your books set there?
Well, I was born in Colorado. I grew up in a small town, not on the Eastern Plains, but in the southern part of the state. And, I've seen the state change tremendously, and not just my own neighborhood in Denver, but the entire state changed considerably. When I was a little kid, I would go fishing with my father and my uncles, and we could actually hike to a lake and be the only ones there fishing. And that's very hard to find these days. But so, I love Colorado. I've lived here my entire life. And again, it just seems natural that that's where I would place the stories. And I hope I don't do too much damage to the state's image. So.
No, I don't think so in the slightest. I think you do a great job. Here's kind of a simple question, but one that some readers really want to know is, do I need to read your books in a particular order?
You do not. I believe they stand alone. I've had 2 series now. The first 5 books I wrote were about a Chicano lawyer in Denver, Louis Montes. And they are in chronological order the way I wrote them, but you don't have to read them that way. They make complete sense with just picking one up and reading it. And the same with the Gus novels. And if you want to get the full picture of Gus and his development, well, then, yeah, you could start with Desperado, but that's not necessary.
This is a hard question here. Do you have a favorite of your own books? And if so, which one?
Well, I think the standard answer that most writers give is, the one I'm working on now or the one I just finished. I think that's what writers usually say. In my heart of hearts, though, I got to say that first novel, Rocky Ruiz. I mean, I wrote that without any idea what I was going to do, except I wanted to write the story about this guy that had hung around in my imagination. And so it took me a couple of years. I wrote it. And then I decided I should try to do something with it. And, it just it opened up all kinds of things for me, that first novel. So that's a soft spot in my heart. But
I think so. That's a great answer. So that also being said, though, if you were to write in any other genre, is there any that tickle your fancy, one that you would like to explore?
Well, there is the whole idea of speculative fiction, creating alternative worlds and then seeing what happens with the characters in those worlds. That kind of intrigues me, but I have several friends who do that, and some here in Denver who are quite good at it. So I probably won't try it. They're much better at that than I could ever be.
Fair enough. You found a great lane and we all love it, what you're in. So that's okay if you don't change it. This is a really interesting one too. When did you know you wanted to write novels, and why novels?
Well, I knew I wanted to be a writer at a fairly young age. I mean, I wrote when I was still in what was called junior high about, I created character sketches, and I did that all through high school. I got the encouragement of a teacher named Treva French, who kind of validated the fact that I could actually be a writer. And then I wrote through college. I kind of gave it up when I went to law school and practiced law for about a dozen years. But eventually, when I got burned out, I went and wrote a story about a burned out middle-aged Chicano attorney. And that guy intrigued me so much that I kept expanding the story, and eventually it turned into a novel. And there you go.
Hey, that works. I love it. You take the life experiences, you write what you know. This is a really great one too. What do you think is the difference between a Chicano noir novel written by a Chicano against a Mexican writer, as Dr. Zamora pointed out during the conversation?
I think there would be some very interesting differences, don't you, Professor?
Yeah, definitely. But you'd have to take specific cases and kind of see what you sense are the differences. But it doesn't mean that a man can't write a novel where a woman detective is the main character or the other way around. It just is going to be a different
Yeah,
approach to it. I think that would be an example.
it'd be a different approach, right? And I think so, a Mexican writer, somebody from Mexico, would have a perspective of North America that would be different from a Chicano who's within North America. And that it would be bound to come out in the stories, I would think.
One of a very mild touch on this that Manuel does in his characters is that I don't know what novel is. I think it's My Bad, where the Mexican detective gets involved, but Judicial, I think it is, and he and Gus have some dealings. It's a really interesting interaction. That's one of my favorite parts of that novel, just that whole analysis, and it kind of plays out there just in characters. Anyway, didn't mean to.
Yeah.
No, please join in. It's much more fun when it's a conversation. Absolutely. Let's see what else we've got here in terms of questions here. I think we'll do about 2 more. We'll do 1 more of these, and then we have some prizes we want to give away. But what was the best bit of writing advice that you've ever received?
The best bit of writing advice that I've ever received. Well, if you want to be a good writer, you have to be a good reader. So you need to read, and you need to read everything you can, and you need to read it like a writer would read it, which is another discussion altogether. But you want to be a good writer, be a good reader first.
There you go. I think that's a great, I don't know, as a reader myself and not a writer, I'm all for that, especially working at a bookstore here. So what I'm going to do is we have amazing door prizes, and we actually have 120 people registered tonight, and a lot of them are here watching us right now. So we have 2 door prizes. One of which is, although Manuel's book, Angels in the Wind, isn't a fairy tale, the winner of this prize can enjoy the new book while munching on delicious fairy tale brownies, which is very exciting. And then the second door prize is, once you've read Angels in the Wind, you'll understand the significance of a backpack. And so this prize is a backpack filled with past novels by Manuel Ramos. And so what I'm going to have you do, gentlemen, is I'm actually going to have you pick a number between 1 and 120. I'm going to have you each pick one. Manuel, do you want the brownies or the backpack to be your number?
Brownies, though.
Brownies. Okay. So if you pick a number between 1 and 120, I will look up my list and see what lucky registrant and viewer that is.
Okay. In honor of Gus's pickup, I would say 60.
All right. Here we go. Number 60. Susan Luvano is our winner of the fairy tale brownies. I'm going to write that down. Congratulations. Perfect. All right. And then Jorge, for the backpack of paperbacks, give me a number.
Number 55.
Okay, that's easy. I can just scroll a little bit back past here. Loretto Wolf is the winner of the backpack of paperbacks. Oh, I just muted myself accidentally very quickly there. So Loretto Wolf gets the backpacks, and Susan Luvano, congratulations, you get the brownies. So what we're going to do, Tattered Cover is going to be reaching out to you for pickup and stuff, and we're going to work with Manuel and his wife Flo to make sure that you get those prizes. So congratulations to Susan and Loretta. Yay!
Right. Congratulations.
I know, you never think about winning prizes at a live stream. Good job. So the last question that we want to ask here is for both of you, actually. For Jorge, you as a reader, and Manuel, you as the writer. But what did the book Angels in the Wind teach you? And Jorge, I'd love it if you could start, and then we'll end with our author of the hour, Manuel, here tonight.
Well, it taught me that it's not just adults that can be involved in hard-boiled crime fiction. this is a very moving story because it's got young kids in it. So it's a real different twist from the previous stories. If that can be said to have been something that I learned, that's what I learned from Manuel's latest novel. Really enjoyed it.
I like that. And Manuel?
What did I learn? Well, this may sound facetious, but it's actually very meaningful to me. I learned that I could actually write while sitting in the front yard of my house in a blazing summer day and still be creative and get lost in the story. So
that's beautiful. I think that's great. You learn something about yourself, whatever that may be. You know, I think that we learn so much as readers. It's always really nice to know from the writers what they learn from the books themselves. So we love asking that question here. Manuel, Jorge, this has been wonderful. Congratulations again on your new book, Angels in the Wind. And I want to let everybody know, those who have ordered the book with us so far, we're working with the publisher right now, and we're going to get copies in very, very soon. So we'll be in contact with you about those copies. So no worries there. We promise they're coming. So thank you for your patience. I want to give each of you a chance to remind people who you are, where they can find you online, and anything else that you want to say before we end this evening. And Dr. Zamora, I will start with you, and we will end with our author, Manuel Ramos.
Well, again, I'm a recovering lawyer like Manuel, and I then became a professor at Texas Tech. I teach Latin American literature and professional Spanish at the undergrad level. And I read crime fiction and write about crime fiction whenever I get a chance. And that's how I learned about Manuel's novels. And thank you again, Tattered Bookstore and Manuel, for having invited me here.
Absolutely. And Manuel?
Well, I am a retired attorney. I spent most of my professional career working for Colorado Legal Services, and I want to give a big hello to my friends and colleagues from CLS who may be watching tonight. I'm retired and spend quite a bit of time here trying to help my wife as much as I can. And I'm writing. And occasionally I make a model car kit or two.
Wonderful. And I'm McKaylee with Tattered Cover Bookstore. I want to say thank you all again for supporting us this evening. Shopping at local independent bookstores and local businesses helps your community more than you'll ever know. So thank you for doing that. Gentlemen, if you'll stick around while I just close this out here. We've been celebrating Angels in the Wind by Manuel Ramos for his newest release. We're so excited to have him here. Can't believe we're celebrating another wonderful book from this local author. We're so excited here. Join us for upcoming events. You can find out all of those at tatteredcover.com/event. Thank you all for joining us. Stay safe, everybody, and happy reading. Good night, all.
Good night.